Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. When Claire and I first married, life felt like a dream. She was my best friend, my partner, and my greatest source of joy. We built a life together, a comfortable suburban home with a pool, 2 wonderful children, and careers that complemented each other. I worked from home, managing my projects while also caring for the kids, and she thrived in her dynamic job at a marketing firm. On paper, we were the perfect couple. In reality, I believed we were. It started innocently enough, a Thursday morning like any other. Our mornings were a symphony of chaos, kids half-dressed, cereal bowls left half-eaten, backpacks strewn about. Amid the usual morning rush, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code matched the city Claire was visiting for work. Curious, I answered. "Hello." "Hey, it's me," Claire said, her voice tinged with urgency. "I need you to do something for me. My purse was stolen last night at the hotel. It's a mess. Can you cancel our credit cards? I already told my boss, and she's arranging replacements for the company ones." Her words came in a rush, and I struggled to keep up. "Wait, your purse was stolen. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, a bit too quickly. "It's just frustrating. I went to grab a newspaper in the hotel lobby and must have left it on the counter. When I came back, it was gone." "Did you call the police?" "Yes, and they're looking into it. I need you to cancel everything, though, our cards, especially." There was about $200 in cash in my wallet, but luckily, my makeup bag and work files are safe in the room. "Just, handle it, please." I assured her I'd take care of it and hung up, feeling an odd sense of unease. Claire was usually careful with her belongings, and the idea of her being absent-minded enough to leave her purse unattended didn't sit right with me. Still, I pushed the thought aside and went about my day. Life had enough complications without inventing problems where none existed, or so I told myself. Weeks passed, and the memory of that call faded into the background. Claire returned from her trip, and everything resumed its usual rhythm. But then, one afternoon while organizing the home office, I stumbled upon something unexpected, a folder containing monthly statements from Claire's private investment account. She had always been transparent about her inheritance from her parents' estate, and we agreed she would manage it separately. Yet, I couldn't resist taking a peek, my curiosity getting the better of me. The account had grown significantly over the years, from $350,000 to over $400,000. But one transaction stood out, a $3,000 withdrawal to a local jewelry store, dated just 2 days after the supposed theft of her purse. My heart sank. Claire hadn't mentioned any jewelry purchase to me, let alone one worth that much. And why would she? Our financial arrangements had always been clear, no secrets. I stared at the statement, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Could there be an innocent explanation? Perhaps she had bought a gift for someone, a friend or family member. But if so, why not mention it? The unease from that morning phone call returned with a vengeance. I knew I couldn't let it go. My mind raced as I considered my next move. Should I confront her outright? No, not yet. I needed more information. Deciding to investigate further, I jotted down the jewelry store's phone number and made the call. The woman who answered was friendly, her voice bright and professional. "Thank you for calling Evergreen Jewelers. How can I assist you?" I cleared my throat, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Hi, my name is Alex. My wife recently made a purchase at your store, a couple of weeks ago, I believe. I was wondering if you could confirm what it was. We may have an issue with the item, and I'd like to check if it's under warranty." "Of course," she said. "Do you have the transaction date or an item description?" I rattled off the date and waited as she clicked away on her keyboard. "Ah, yes," she said after a moment. "I remember this purchase. Your wife was quite distressed when she came in. She mentioned losing her wedding and engagement rings and wanted replacements. We worked with her to find suitable options. Such a lovely lady. Her words hit me like a freight train. Wedding and engagement rings. My eyes darted to the memory of Claire's hand. Her rings hadn't gone anywhere. They were as present as ever, sparkling in the sunlight during family barbecues, glinting when she tucked the kids into bed. I stammered a thank you and hung up, my mind reeling. This wasn't adding up. If she hadn't lost her rings, who were these replacements for? A chill crept over me as my thoughts spiraled into darker territory. Had there been signs I'd missed? The late nights at work, the business trips that seemed more frequent lately, the slight shift in her demeanor, had it all been there, hiding in plain sight? The house felt too small, too quiet, as I sat there clutching the phone. I replayed the conversation in my mind, dissecting every word, every pause. Claire's cheerful voice echoed in my memory, the ease with which she'd assured me that everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine, not anymore. I had two choices: confront her with the little I knew or dig deeper to uncover the truth. A part of me longed to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that there was an explanation waiting just beyond my reach. But another part, the part that had started to doubt, whispered that this was only the beginning. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what I might find. The hours following my discovery felt like an eternity. I sat in the home office, staring at the innocuous folder containing Claire's financial records, my mind awash with unanswered questions. Part of me wanted to storm into the kitchen and demand answers, but I knew better. Confrontation without evidence was a surefire way to elicit defensiveness, not truth. If Claire was hiding something, I needed more than suspicions to get to the bottom of it. For days, I kept my distance, observing her with a sharpened focus. I analyzed every smile, every movement, every offhand comment. She remained the same Claire I had always known, or so it seemed. But my perception was skewed now, tainted by what I'd learned. I couldn't help but see her gestures through a lens of potential deceit. The first tangible crack appeared the following week. Claire had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she got the kids ready for bed. The screen was still on, displaying an email draft addressed to someone named Nick. It was the subject line that caught my attention: looking forward to our weekend. My chest tightened as I fought the urge to immediately read the message. Instead, I glanced toward the hallway, ensuring Claire was still upstairs. The guilt of invading her privacy warred with the undeniable need to know what was happening. I gave in. The draft was short and casual but loaded with implications. Nick, I can't wait to see you. These trips are the only thing keeping me sane these days. You're my escape from everything. Counting the hours. My blood ran cold. Nick wasn't a colleague or a work contact, at least not in the professional sense. His name hadn't come up in conversation before, and now it was glaring evidence of something I'd been dreading. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. I closed the laptop, careful to leave no trace of my intrusion, and retreated to the living room. The TV was on, some mindless show playing in the background, but my thoughts drowned out the noise. Who was Nick? How long had this been going on? Was I just collateral damage in some romantic escapade she was living out? The next morning, I decided to investigate further. Claire had left for work early, and the house was quiet. I started with her phone. She always kept it close, but when she showered, she left it charging in the kitchen. I knew her passcode. It was one of those tiny details couples take for granted. My fingers trembled as I unlocked it. Her messages revealed little at first, mostly work texts and group chats with friends. But tucked away in a folder labeled Archived, I found a thread with Nick. My heart pounded as I scrolled through their exchanges. They spoke in shorthand, as though they had their own secret language. The messages were intimate without being overtly explicit, filled with inside jokes and references to their time together. One message stood out: "Can't wait to see you again this weekend. Same hotel, same time. Let me know if you're bringing the necklace. The necklace. My mind flashed to the $3,000 jewelry purchase. Claire hadn't lost her rings, they were an excuse, a fabrication. She had bought something for him. My stomach churned as I realized how meticulously this deception had been orchestrated. Over the next few days, I pieced together the pattern of her work trips. They lined up with weekends when Nick was also mentioned in her messages. The puzzle was coming together, but it was an image I didn't want to see. Still, I held off on confronting her. Every fiber of my being wanted to demand the truth, to force her to admit what she had done, but I couldn't, not yet. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. I found it that Friday. Claire had another trip planned. She kissed me on the cheek as she left the house, her overnight bag slung casually over her shoulder. "I'll be back Sunday evening," she said, her tone breezy. "Don't forget Emma's recital tomorrow." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Have a safe trip." As soon as she was gone, I went to work. I had installed a GPS tracker on her car earlier that week, and now I opened the app on my phone to monitor her location. I watched as the tiny dot representing her car moved away from our house, heading not toward her supposed work destination but in the opposite direction, toward a boutique hotel downtown. When the dot stopped, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was my chance to confirm everything. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, unsure of what I would do when I got there but certain I couldn't sit idly by any longer. The hotel was a sleek, modern building nestled in the heart of the city. I parked a block away and walked briskly toward the entrance, my heart pounding. Once inside, I scanned the lobby, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or her companion. My hands clenched into fists at my sides as I imagined what I might find. Then I saw her. Claire stood near the reception desk, her back to me, laughing softly as she spoke with a man. He was tall, well-dressed, and charismatic, the kind of person who seemed to command attention effortlessly. She reached out to touch his arm, a gesture so casual yet so intimate it made my stomach twist. I didn't approach them. I couldn't. The sight of her with him was confirmation enough. My instinct screamed at me to march up and confront them both, to demand an explanation, but something held me back. This wasn't the time or place. Instead, I turned and walked out, my mind racing with the possibilities of what came next. That night, as I sat alone in our home, the weight of what I'd seen pressed down on me. I couldn't unsee the way she had looked at him, the way she had smiled, the way she had touched his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. Claire wasn't just my wife anymore, she was someone else entirely, someone I didn't recognize. The next steps were clear. I would confront her, but I wouldn't do it in anger. This wasn't just about her betrayal, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my sense of self. Claire may have built a world of lies, but I wouldn't live in it any longer. The hours before Claire returned were excruciating. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I would say. Every scenario ended with my anger boiling over, my words cutting too deep. But I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. If this was to end, it would end on my terms. I resolved to remain calm, composed, and in control. When her car pulled into the driveway late Sunday evening, I took a deep breath. She walked through the door with her usual ease, her overnight bag slung over one shoulder and her phone in hand. She gave me a tired smile. "Hey," she said, setting the bag down. "How was your weekend?" I couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly she slipped back into her role as a doting wife. For a moment, I almost doubted myself, wondering if I had misread everything. But then the image of her laughing with Nick at the hotel came rushing back, solidifying my resolve. "Fine," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Emma's recital went well." "Oh, good. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. Work has been insane lately." She moved toward the kitchen, pulling open the fridge to grab a bottle of water. Claire, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. She paused, the bottle halfway to her lips. What's up? We need to talk. The words hung heavy in the air. She set the bottle down and turned to face me, her smile faltering. Okay, about what? I gestured toward the dining table. Sit down. Her brow furrowed, but she complied, pulling out a chair and sitting across from me. I took a seat as well, the weight of the conversation pressing on my chest. I know, I said simply, watching her reaction. Her face shifted, a mixture of confusion and unease. You know what? About Nick. About the trips. About everything. For a split second, I saw a panic flash across her face before she quickly masked it with indignation. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Don't insult my intelligence, Claire. I've seen the messages. I've tracked your car. I know about the hotel. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but no words came out. She looked down at her hands, her composure crumbling. It's not what you think, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then tell me, I challenged, my voice cold. Explain it to me. She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Finally, she exhaled deeply and met my gaze. It started a few months ago. I didn't mean for it to happen. That's what they all say, I said bitterly. Go on. She flinched at my tone but continued. It was at a work event. Nick is a colleague, and we hit it off. At first, it was just harmless flirting, but then. I don't know. I felt. Don't say, alive, I interrupted, my voice rising. Don't give me some cliché about how he made you feel alive or seen or whatever other excuse you think will justify this. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did, I said, my anger simmering just below the surface. You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed everything we built together. Was it worth it, Claire? Was he worth it? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know. I don't know why I did it. I felt stuck. Like I was suffocating. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. I paced the room, running my hands through my hair. Do you have any idea what you've done? To me? To our family? I love you, she said desperately. I never stopped loving you. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. You have a funny way of showing it. I made a mistake, she pleaded. I can fix this. We can fix this. I stopped pacing and turned to face her. No, Claire. You made a choice. Over and over again, you chose him. This wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. She stood and moved toward me, her hands outstretched. Please, Alex. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll cut him off. I'll go to counseling. Just don't give up on us. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. It's not that simple. You don't get to shatter my trust and then decide you want to piece it back together when it's convenient for you. Think about the kids, she begged. Think about our family. I am thinking about them, I said, my voice firm. Which is why I can't let them grow up in a house built on lies. Her face crumpled, and she sank back into the chair, sobbing. I felt a pang of guilt, but I forced myself to push it aside. This wasn't my burden to bear, it was hers. I'll stay in the guest room for now, I said, my voice hollow. We'll figure out the logistics later. But this marriage is over. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. Alex, please. I didn't respond. I turned and walked out of the room, her sobs echoing behind me. Upstairs, I closed the door to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space where she used to sleep. The enormity of what had just happened washed over me, leaving me numb. The house felt impossibly quiet that night. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be alone, even when someone was just a room away. But as painful as it was, I knew I had made the right decision. Trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild. And without trust, what was a marriage but a hollow shell? As I lay there in the darkness, I resolved to move forward, one step at a time. Claire may have unraveled the life we built, but I wouldn't let her take my future with her. This was my chance to rebuild, not with her, but for myself. The weeks after Claire's confession were a blur of quiet chaos. We told the kids together, keeping it vague, careful not to let the cracks in our marriage spill over into their lives. Mom and Dad need some time apart, we explained. Emma, our youngest, cried, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. Jonah, older and more perceptive, simply nodded, his eyes heavy with the understanding of a truth we didn't say aloud. Claire moved into a small apartment across town. It was temporary, she said, a place to give us space. She still held on to the idea that this separation was a pause, not an end. I didn't argue, I didn't have the energy. My heart had become a hollow, beating thing, burdened with the weight of betrayal. Despite her assurances, I filed for divorce a month later. She didn't contest it. Whether it was guilt, resignation, or hope that I might change my mind, I didn't know. She came by often to see the kids, her presence a quiet reminder of what we'd lost. We kept things civil for their sake, but our conversations felt like walking on glass, strained, cautious, painful. One evening, weeks after the divorce was finalized, she stopped by unexpectedly. The kids were asleep, and I was cleaning up the remnants of dinner when I heard the knock at the door. When I opened it, she stood there, her face pale, her hands clutching a folded piece of paper. "Claire," I said, my tone wary. "What's going on?" "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. I stepped aside, letting her in. She sat at the kitchen table, the paper clutched so tightly that her knuckles were white. I poured her a glass of water and sat across from her, waiting. She stopped, her voice catching. She took a shaky breath and pushed the paper across the table. "I got this from the doctor last week." I picked it up, unfolding it slowly. It was a lab report. Words and phrases jumped out at me: irregular masses, stage 4, metastatic. My breath caught as I read the diagnosis: ovarian cancer. Advanced. Terminal. "Claire," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to tell you. But I thought you should know, for the kids." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room seemed to tilt, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a physical force. I set the paper down, my hands trembling. "How long have you known?" 2 months, she admitted. "I've been trying to process it. Figure out what to do." 2 months, I echoed, the words hollow. "And you're just now telling me?" She flinched, her tears falling harder. "I didn't want to burden you. After everything I've done, everything I've ruined, I didn't think you'd care." I felt a surge of anger at her assumption, but it quickly dissolved into something heavier. I did care, despite everything. How could I not? We had spent over a decade building a life together, raising a family. No matter the betrayal, she was still the mother of my children. She was still someone I had loved. "What's the prognosis?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The words on the paper had made it clear. She shook her head, unable to meet my eyes. "They're giving me 6 months. Maybe less." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over us like a suffocating fog. For the first time since our separation, I reached across the table and took her hand. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with surprise. You won't go through this alone, I said, my voice firm. Whatever you need, whatever the kids need, I'll be here. Her face crumpled, and she broke down, sobbing into her hands. I moved to her side, wrapping my arms around her as she cried. For a moment, the anger, the betrayal, the hurt, it all faded. In its place was the memory of the woman I had once loved, the mother of my children, the person who, despite everything, had been my partner in life. Over the next few months, I did everything I could to support her. She moved back into the house, and we told the kids together, this time with no way to shield them from the truth. Jonah was stoic, his grief manifesting in silence. Emma clung to her mother, her small frame shaking with sobs. As the weeks passed, Claire's health declined rapidly. She went from the vibrant, confident woman I had once known to someone frail and unrecognizable. I cared for her, not out of obligation but because it was the right thing to do. Because, in some strange, bittersweet way, I still loved her. On a quiet spring morning, as the sun filtered through the bedroom curtains, Claire took her last breath. I held her hand, whispering words of comfort, even as my own heart broke. When the room fell silent, I felt an ache so profound it was as though the world had stopped turning. The funeral was small, attended by close friends and family. As I stood by her grave, holding Jonah's hand on one side and Emma's on the other, I thought about the life we had shared, the good, the bad, the heartbreak, and the love. In the end, none of it mattered. What mattered was that we had loved, even if imperfectly. As the mourners began to leave, I stayed behind, staring at the fresh mound of earth. Tears blurred my vision, and I whispered the words I hadn't been able to say while she was alive. I forgive you. The wind carried the words away, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. It was a hollow victory, but it was mine. And as I walked back to my children, I knew we would find a way to move forward, together.